Take a person, take a story, take you on a journey. It's your take.
Today's guest is a former singer, actress, and radio broadcaster who has been at the forefront of fundraising for children's hospice, Francis House in Manchester. My guest first appeared in the West End at 15 years of age. By 1968, she rose to fame under the stage name Tiger as the lead singer of the Paper Dolls. The group reached number 8 in the UK singles chart with Something Here in My Heart, Keeps A Tellin Me No, and she also released 3 solo singles under the name Tiger Sue. Outside of music, my guest has presented Top of the Pops, fronted the Granada Television Friday night show Weekend. She joined the Manchester independent radio station Piccadilly Radio and was there from 1979 to 1981. She later joined BBC Radio Manchester, where she twice won the Sony Radio Personality of the Year award. On today's Your Take, I'm joined by Susie Mathis. Susie talks about the many areas she's worked in, the music scene back in the 1960s, her career behind the microphone, and her dedication and commitment to charity work and fundraising. On this very wet and cold Monday morning, I wish you a very warm welcome and thank you for joining me on Your Take.
Absolutely no problem. Little correction though, one Sony Radio Award was for Piccadilly Radio and one was for Radio Manchester.
Okay, no problem.
Nothing else was wrong.
no more black marks.
No more.
I'm looking forward to talking about your many careers on the stage, broadcasting, and you're very much your fundraising work as well. But I always like to go back to the very beginning to start with, and we go back to 1947, and in fact April the 29th. I wanted to begin with by asking you where you were born and where did you spend your childhood, and can you just paint a portrait of your parents, what they did for a living?
Okay.
Did you have any siblings?
Yeah, well, I was born in Battersea. It was snowing, April the 29th in 1947. I was told it was very, very cold. And I was born to Morris and Alice. Alice was a bus conductress during the war and afterwards. And my dad was a bricklayer, a builder. I had an elder brother called Ronnie and a younger brother who actually turned out eventually not to be a brother. He was a cousin, but his name was Robert. And we lived a sort of an okay life. We lived in a council house. We moved from Battersea to Wallington. And then my grandfather won some money because he broke his arm in some sort of accident on his building firm. And so with that money, he bought a pub. And the pub was called the Old Wharf Inn. And that was in Buckinghamshire in a beautiful village, now swallowed by Milton Keynes, but it was called Great Linford. And we lived in this pub because my grandfather asked my mum and dad, would we go and join them? So we upped sticks from London and we went to live what we thought was going to be an idyllic, fabulous life. But no, it certainly wasn't. After a few years, my mother started having an affair with one of the regulars. And my father, who was building the motorway, the M1 at the time, from Newport Pagnell, obviously when he found out, he was extremely jealous, and he tried to lose both myself and my mum. So it was a very traumatic time. My mum went off the back of a motorbike with the guy that she'd fallen in love with, and my father went into prison for a while. And life was really very, very difficult. I was going to a little tiny school in Great Linford and had contracted a really bad wheeze because of all the nerves of the situation. My brother was actually much older than me and he was studying to be a chef. And my younger brother was so traumatized, he was taken away. And from that moment on, my life took a very, very nasty turn. But one lady saved my whole life at the time, and her name was Betty Pidraffen. And she was taking a leisurely drive on a Sunday morning in Buckinghamshire, and she called into the pub, saw me having a wheezing fit in the corner, and said, "What's wrong with that little girl?" My nan explained everything that had gone on, and she said, "Well, she's always wanted to be a dancer, and Betty Pidraffen had a dancing school, and she invited me to go to her school as a boarder, and I did. And she literally paid for the rest of my schooling life until I was 13.
I wanted to talk about, you've spoken about a very traumatic and very, I suppose, unstable kind of childhood. I
Very
wanted
much
to
so.
talk about this moment of going to like drama and dance school. Would you say that was kind of the ultimate big change in your life? And did that
Yeah.
ultimately make you more aspirational and want to eventually pursue a career in the entertainment industry?
Well, I've been going to dancing school since I was 4. And so, and I did acrobatic work as well. I was at the Scala Theatre when I was 4 in London, performing, jumping out of a box, doing all sorts of contortionist tricks. And so I was definitely sort of a little show busy girl. I was a real big show off, even when I was very tiny. But the stage school taught me the craft. And obviously, I learned to dance. I wanted to be a ballet dancer. That was my big dream at the time. And that school gave me an awful lot. There wasn't much love and emotion because it was very strict. And I was obviously the poorest person that went to the school. The rest were obviously, it cost a fortune to go to the Pitt-Draffen Academy of Dancing and Dramatic Art. And I wasn't paying. So I always felt that I had to make up for the fact that I was a freebie by doing things. I was the person that went and got the hot bread in the morning, or I cleaned out the cocktail cabinet, or I polished the Berwick china horses on the hallway. But the thing is, I always had every class available to me when I wanted to dance, sing, act, or anything. So I was sort of a 24/7 learning child. So I absolutely loved being there. It literally made my life. And I started in repertory at the age of 13 from going to the academy, and I was doing auditions. I did the first Thornton special toffee advert. Why do they call it special? And that was when I was very, very young, and I was put up for every audition that came along. So I was extremely lucky in that respect. And Joe Cook, who was the original choreographer for the Dancers on Top of the Pops, the Go-Joes, was the daughter-in-law of Betty Pidraffen. So she would come and teach me dances. So honestly, I had to obviously go into show business. There was nowhere else to go. I was hopeless at everything else anyway.
Before we talk about show business and we talk about your breakthroughs, particularly at a young age, making your debut on the West End, I kind of wanted to pick up on the whole dance school experience, as well as kind of what was going on in your home life. Once you've made that decision to pursue that career, had you ultimately made a choice to that the career for you was going to be number one choice of the ultimate goal? And had you made a separation away from your family? Did you still keep in
I did.
contact with
Yeah.
them, or?
Well, no, the family unfortunately disintegrated. I never saw Robert ever again. And it was many years before I saw my brother. My father, I didn't see for about, in fact, the first time I saw him was when I was working Caesar's Palace in Luton as a paper doll. So you're talking about huge separation. My mother, as I say, I didn't want to know about, typical daughter that doesn't want to know about the stepfather. And I certainly didn't want to know about him. He'd ruined, as far as I was concerned, he'd ruined all of our lives. And very soon after, the two of them went off to live in Australia. So I didn't have any family to think of at all. All I did was think about what I did with my day-to-day life, which was learn to dance, learn to act, sing, etc. That was my life.
We'll move on to the period where you made your debut at the West End, which was at just the age of 15. How did that breakthrough happen? And can you tell me the name of the production and the role, and how that ultimately led to other opportunities on stage and other avenues?
Yeah, I mean, as I said before, Betty put me up for every audition going. And one of the first was for Tony Newley in Stop the World, I Want to Get Off. And he was an idol of mine. If she should come to you, remember. I mean, I just absolutely adored him. I thought he was the strange world of Gurney Slade, and he was amazing. And when I went for that audition, I was 14. 4'11" and 14. I'm still 4'11", by the way, but I'm nearly 75 now. But at the time, it was a really big deal. And I think there was, if I remember correctly, there was over 80 girls went for that audition. Sorry, 800 girls went for that audition. And it was fine-tuned down to about 20. And I was very, very tiny, as I said, and obviously very, very young. And I remember they were all the girls were singing things like, Sunday, sweet Sunday, it is all very good of show business. And I did, won't you play the music so the cradle can rock to a lullaby in ragtime. And I saw Anthony Newley walking around the stalls singing it, won't you play the music? I thought, oh, I've got this. I've got this audition. And I was so excited because just to be able to tell Betty that I'd got it was one of the greatest moments, because although she wasn't an emotional, person and touchy-feely, she gave me the chance of a lifetime, and she paid for my life. I mean, goodness me, what a woman. So I remember ringing her up, and I was with a chaperone, obviously, at the time, and saying, I've got it. And I remember Anthony Newley saying to me, and how tall are you? And everybody lies, don't they? They all lie. I'm 5'7", and they're 4'9". I said, I'm 4'11", honest inches. And I am 14, but I'm 15 on April the 29th. And I got it. And I can't tell you, it was the most exciting day ever for me. When I rang Betty, she said, I'll have a surprise waiting for you when you get back. That was unusual. I thought, oh, what's this? Because usually I was in the back of her car with two bulldogs, having a Vimto. So that was my best thing I ever had in a weekend. But when I got back, she made me a fried egg sandwich and a top bunk. And that was my, you've done good, girl. Because we never had fried egg sandwiches. We never ate things like that. And certainly everybody wanted top bunks. You never wanted to be on the bottom ones. And it was a very exciting moment. And then Anthony Newley, I mean, that actually didn't come to fruition, because Anthony Newley then got a massive break to go to Broadway, and he tried to take the people from England. But very, very sadly, in those days, equity didn't allow the swapping. And that was a massive thing at the time. And I had this letter from Tony Newley saying, I'm very, very sad, but unfortunately we can't continue, and I hope we'll meet again. And we did do several times afterwards. But then I did The Music Man, and then I went into a musical. I mean, at that time, all I wanted to do was to be on stage. That's all that, that was the only thing I wanted. So I went into a big musical called Love for Jamie. Then I went to Scotland for like 2.5 years in the 5 past 8 shows with Freddie Carpenter, who made people like Danny LaRue and Ronnie Corbett very famous. And that was it. I was on the road to something, but I was so miserable at the end of every production. I was so saddened because I realized that I made the shows my family. So even the stage doorman, he wasn't just a stage doorman to me. He was my person every day. Hi, Tom. You got my letters. And I realized that even though I didn't have the family that I wanted to be with, I started making the productions my family, and saying goodbye at the end became very difficult for me. It wasn't enough to have a potted plant and a card saying good luck and we'll see you in the future, because that never happens anyway. It's all a load of lies. So after the few years, I realized that wasn't the life for me. I'd failed at being a ballet dancer because unfortunately I was too tiny for the Royal Ballet at the time, because how ridiculous it was then. It isn't like it now, but then, if you were a certain height and your bones would not grow a certain way, you couldn't go forward to be a ballet dancer at the Royal Ballet. It was Wayne Sleep that changed. Well, he certainly helped to change all that. And so life really, I thought, oh my God, this is it. I'm coming out of show business. It's just not going to work for me. And so Betty said, come back to the school, and let's get you together with a couple of the girls and let's build an act. And that's how it happened.
This comes on nicely to my next point in our conversation. You'd achieved your dream to perform on stage, but there seems to be tinged with sadness as well, separating from some of the people you work with on stage and behind the scenes.
Definitely.
And then we rewind, well, we go forward a little bit in time to the late 1960s. And I have to confess, I'm a huge fan of the 60s, and part of me wish I was born in that particular era. But I wanted to ask you, how did you form the group The Paper Dolls in the late 1960s? How did you meet the other members, and who was the band's manager, and how were you eventually signed to a record label?
Yeah, well, it's just a hell of a long story that, you know, this could keep us here a lot of the time. But basically, what happened was with my disillusionment of being in a stage show, I went back to Pitt Draffen's Academy on Betty's behest, and she said, okay, girl, let's get you together with a couple of the girls. So the Paper Dolls were made up with 3 girls from the stage school. So, you know, Spider and Copper was Susan Marshall and Pauline Bennett, who I went to school with and worked with, you know, many, many times on different we always did lots of shows that called the Sunshine shows and stuff we used to do for medals and things throughout the dancing year. And so we formed the girl group. We basically choreographed ourselves. I did most of the choreography. And Betty at the time got us our first job, which was at the City of Varieties in Leeds. As originally we were called the Dance Trends Incorporated, incorporating singing, this is. Dance Trends Incorporated went to the City of Varieties thinking it was like a music hall place where we used to see the music hall in the City of Varieties, but it was a strip joint. Yeah, it was a strip joint.
I've never been in one of those, I can assure you.
Well, it wasn't. It was a beautiful theatre. I mean, it's beautiful. I mean, you won't remember the old time musical, but that was on television every weekend as the old time musical City of Varieties in Leeds. But it was actually running as a strip joint. When I say strip joint, I mean there were strippers topping the bill. So if the strippers were called the Broquettes, we'd be called the Brigettettes. If it was called the Titty Valaris, we were the Valariettes. So we were the 3 girls that were on the bill. But we were, I mean, because I was so against, I mean, we nearly died when we got there, and Betty had no idea whatsoever. And we were bottom of the bill. And I made sure that we wore things that were really fully clothed. We did things like working in a coal mine, going down with pit hats on. You know, I mean, we were the furthest away from the strippers you could ever imagine. Or we do Yellow Submarine, you know, in all the balaclavas and the raincoats. Or the Beatles, When I'm 64, dressed as all the characters. And we became, in fact, we took over in the 18 months that we worked without that. We did loads of shows there, and we did 3 shows, 4 shows a night sometimes. But we would do, we would go from Dance Trends Incorporated to 18 months later, topping the bill at the City of Varieties, and called ourselves the Dolly Set. And we were topping the bill. I mean, and the strippers were the bottom of the bill. So, you know, it was an amazing thing to do that. And then we were working other clubs, the Wakefield clubs, Huddersfield, Leeds, all these clubs at night time. And at one of the clubs, Peter Stringfellow came to see us, thought we were the bee's knees, and said, right, okay, I'm going to take you to London, and we're going to see if we can get this record contract that Pi are offering. So I'll see you at 6 o'clock in the morning, and that's that. So at 6 o'clock in the morning, we didn't even get up because we thought, we've only been in this business for 18 months. We didn't even own a pair of tights between us. We were so penniless. We earned £19 a week at the time. And that was for about, I don't know, God knows how many shows. That was the City of Varieties. And then at the weekends, we'd noon and light nights at different clubs. We were very poor. We had nothing really. And we hadn't gone back. Betty didn't even know what was going on in our lives. I was sewing around the girls, making costumes. Oh, it was pitiful. Anyway, we didn't turn up the first day, but the second day he rang up. He says, "Do you want to be effing stars or don't you? I'm picking you up tomorrow." And he did. And on the way down, we learnt the harmonies to Falling in and Out of Love. And we were just, working out what we were going to do at the audition. And we stopped at Lewis's on the way down, and we bought some pretty Polly Perkins tights for 4 and 11 and put our tights on. And we felt really good. And we went into that audition at Pie Studios, and the producers were all behind the desk, and we sang Falling in and Out of Love. And it was really loud. I remember them going, "Oh my God," because we weren't used to microphones and techniques. We were used to being on a stage and singing, "You keep saying that you've got something for me," really loud. And anyway, we sang it quietly then, Falling in and Out of Love. And we got it. And we got it. And then we had to go back all the way to Leeds and then tell the people that were looking after us at the time, who were called the Joseph brothers and Claude Hunter, and say, "We've got a record deal in London. We have to leave in a few weeks." And that's how it came about.
And the rest is history, as they say. I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you, you used the stage name Tiger when you were lead singer of the Paper
Yeah.
Dolls.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you where that name came from, and is there a story behind it?
No, not really. It's just that at school we'd had silly nicknames. I mean, it's strange, isn't it? Because now, and you think years and years later, we must, Spice Girls and stuff, and all there. We did that way back, but we had those nicknames at the end of school. Usual thing. Copper had red hair. Spider hated spiders, and Tiger. I think that was because I was a survivor, or maybe I roared at people. I don't know, one or the other. Probably did roar a bit. Still do a bit.
From the recording contract with Pi, and you've mentioned your association with Peter Stringfellow, we come now to the actual hit single, which was called Something Here in My Heart Keeps A Telling Me No, which reached number 8 in the UK singles chart. I wanted to ask you who wrote the song, what are your memories of recording it and performing it for television and radio publicity?
Oh God, I mean, the thing is, as you know, we only had one massive hit, but the thing that really catapulted us into everybody's sort of lives at the time was the press around it, because we were sort of the very first pop girl trio from Britain. We had all the others. We had Martha Reeves, the Vandellas, the Supremes, and all the American sounding acts, but we didn't have British girls, because before us there was only people like the Beverly Sisters, the Kay Sisters, the Vernon Girls, and they were all very, very, backing people on Morecambe and Wise and stuff. So we were proper pop. So we got so much press. And when we recorded the song, the wonderful thing was that we recorded it live, vocally, with the musicians, unheard of these days, but way back then. Absolutely magnificent. And we shared the studio time with Long John Baldry.
Oh wow, yeah.
So he recorded Let the Heartache Begin.
Bluesy, folky name from the past, didn't it?
Yeah, bless him. And of course, at the time, he was very involved with Elton John. Elton John was actually in the box watching us as we recorded Something Here in My Heart. And it was absolutely fantastic. And I mean, to actually be involved in the record business in that decade of the 60s, I mean, I just feel that all the things I've done have happened in the decades I would never have chosen ever any other. Because, the first Top of the Pops, you're on with your Tom Jones, and, I mean, absolutely phenomenal times. I mean, we did Top of the Pops so many times with those first 3 songs. It was ridiculous. And they were marvelous times. And the excitement around the 60s and around the Paper Dolls at the time was superb. I mean, we could not have had a better time. It was brilliant. Unfortunately, the person that wrote the song was Tony McCauley, who, I don't know, we didn't really get on too well after that. We recorded a fantastic song after that he then, we'd recorded it and then he gave it to the foundations. He then didn't allow any time for the mixing of the album, and he didn't really help us very much after that. So, but, so what, never mind. But we had a ball. And to do the things we did at the time, when we traveled the world, I mean, it was just extraordinary. We have sets made for us at Metro Goldwyn Mayer, you know, the Dolly set, and, you know, it was just fantastic. It was brilliant. Yeah, so great memories, would never have changed the decade. And the 60s tours were, well, unlike any other tours. We were the only females, of course, and working.
Obviously, back in those days, interestingly, from kind of the 1950s onwards, you get these big shows where artists would go on and maybe perform three numbers, but there would be sort of six household names on that bill.
Oh,
Who were the
God.
kind of bands and solo artists you perform with then on those kind of
The
touring
60s, yeah,
shows?
okay. Well, the first tour was Scott Walker.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Scott Walker, Herman's Hermits, Love Affair, Casuals, John Rolls, um, Amen Corner. You know, those were the bands, and those were the heady days that we were. Jerry Marsden. Yeah, we were the only girls on any of them, which had its downsides. Believe you me, because the girls we had to really persuade to like us. But you know, you ended up doing that. You ended pay more attention to the females because the guys were already there. You know, it was a great time. Great time.
Great times, and you've been very much reminiscing about touring, recording, some of the people you've worked with, the lineups.
Marvelous.
But sadly, after various lineups, the Paper Dolls split in 1975.
Yeah.
Why did the group disband, and how do you look back at your time in the group?
Okay, well, the thing is about the three girl groups, they don't work. I mean, you look back at every three girl group there's ever been, or four girl group, girls are, oh, you know, have the guys any day. Because either one of the girls is gonna meet someone and fall in love, or you know, they're gonna fall out, or yeah, there's always gonna be something that goes on.
Egos, I guess, get involved. Egos as well.
Egos, absolutely.
And,
Egos,
and with
absolutely.
and with most bands, I suppose you have a principal songwriter, and there's always issues around songwriting and that person getting more royalties than the other band members.
But way back, and there's a couple of things to say there, but way back then, you were not encouraged to write your songs, and we actually wrote some songs, and they didn't even let us put our names to them. You know, the publishers know it won't work because of the public. We were just idiots. We earned no money whatsoever. All the money that, you know, waiting for the record to be a hit and stuff like that. We're living in a hotel, buying clothes down King's Road for Top of the Pops, doing this, doing that. We had no money. All the money was building up, and then you had to pay it back. And it was an awful time. We ended up at one point topping the bill at the South Pier in Blackpool, and we were earning £30 a week each. I mean, it was a disgrace. I mean, you look at what happens, you know, even from the beginning of the X Factor days, they're all wealthy. They're looked after, they're managed properly, they're cared for. Ours were rubbish. And you know, a guy called John McArdle started with that. He ran off with most of the money anyway. He was hopeless. And it was just a terrible, and we were not the only ones. Those 60s days, there were so many bands struggling with what was going on financially. It wasn't really until the mid 80s, even the 80s, there was all the arguments about it's still arguments about royalties in the 80s, you know. So it wasn't anything to do with that with our group, and we were that stupid that when we did get a fantastic band, we took over Dusty Springfield's band Bluesology. We were earning the same as them. We never, all the bands that we had, we would just do it pro rata. We would earn the same money as the person that was the drummer. We were useless. We had nobody to guide us. And I had never had any history of learning about finances. I've been crap at it my whole life.
I wanted to ask you as well, you were in the Paper Dolls, but you also had a brief solo career as well under the name Tiger Sue.
Yeah. Just to finish on the three girls.
Sure.
First girl left within 18 months, Pauline. Second girl left and I replaced her. Second girl left and I replaced her. Third girl left and I replaced her. And then there came a time where I thought that going back to all those years ago about families, you can't just replace people like that. Because they've become part of your life. And I thought, no, that's the end of it. That's enough. Sorry, what was that question again?
Yeah, with your solo career,
Oh yeah.
did you find that more lucrative?
No, did I?
And did you want to kind of branch off and separate from the group and become
No,
a solo performer?
never. No, I never did. Never did. I loved having the girls there, because when you're on your own, if you're having a wonderful time, you've got no one to share it with. And if it's awful and you're dying on your backside, it's awful as well. So I couldn't see any merit in it. I went into pantomime on my own. I mean, the records was fine. I was absolutely fine doing the records and promoting the record. That was okay, but it was the live performances, that I found hard on my own. And I went into pantomime with Cannonball and the Grumbleweeds and people like that, playing Polly Perkins and all this crap. But it just didn't work for me. It wasn't working. I knew that I always needed something around me. I think that was always the cushion that I needed.
We're going to change course slightly, and we've
Oh
spoken.
hell, where are we going now?
We're going to change course from music now to your career as a presenter and as a broadcaster. And to start with, you presented Top of the Pops on 2 occasions. Can you recall how you got the role and who performed on those episodes you presented? And then I wanted to ask you about your involvement in fronting the Granada Television show Friday night.
Yeah.
Sorry, the Friday night show.
Weekend, it was called.
Weekend, yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, let me get to the first part then. So I'd started in radio because I was working with the Grumbleweeds, and their manager, Stuart Littlewood, knowing me and had known me for a lot of years, knew I wasn't happy and said, "Why don't you try radio, Suze?" And I said, "What? The only thing I can have anything to do with radio is listening to it, to music." He said, "No, I think you should go and try radio." So he made an arrangement, an appointment with a guy called Colin Walters, who was the head of Piccadilly Radio, which was the largest station. And it was a very exciting time for local radio because it'd only been going for a couple of years and everybody suddenly had their own radio station. So you had a phenomenal sized audience. And I was actually working on radio, and it was quite a few years after Piccadilly really that I got a phone call. I'd interviewed the producer of Top of the Pops, and he rang up and said, "How would you like to present it, Suze?" I said, "Well, of course I bloody would." And I did. 1989 and 1990, and it was a massive surprise, and it was very exciting. The first one was with Bruno Brooks, who was very difficult. He really didn't want me to be on it at all. He made it as hard as he possibly could for me. And I remember thinking, when they do the countdown and 40, 30, all that stuff, very exciting stuff. And I'm really enjoying it. And I thought to myself, please don't let me have anybody with really long names. Let me get used to this.
Or a name that's hard to pronounce. That's the worst one, yeah.
Here it is, Tanita Tikaram. Jesus, I thought, shit, that's just my bloody luck. That is Tanita Tikaram. So and that was great. And the second one I did with the very lovely Gary Davis, who was, of course, absolutely fantastic and charming to me. And so he should be, because I was very charming to him because he worked at Piccadilly Radio when I was there.
Sure.
So radio was a marvelous thing because I found it a brilliant medium. It was intimate. I was absolutely astounded how many people were listening to me. It was a joy to work in radio, and I adored it. And the amount of famous people that I met, from Jack Lemmon to Jane Fonda to Raquel Welch to Charlton Heston to Joan Collins to Michael Crawford everybody. I just interviewed everybody over those years. And I was in Piccadilly from 79 to 85, and 85 to 90, I was at Radio Manchester. And then I went back to Piccadilly at 1990 when the new head of production was there, Mark Story. So it was right the way through till 96. So I was there a long time in radio.
With your background in stage and of course in music as well, performing to live audiences and all the experience you built up over a course of time, surely was radio for you just second nature? It was almost just repeating the same kind of skills you'd already gained, but just doing it across a different medium to kind of a different audience?
Well, the thing is, radio is a totally unusual medium because, unlike anything else, I mean, a live performance, you've got hundreds of people that you can see that you're trying to get on your side. And with radio, you are talking, or you're always told to talk to one person. And so it's the intimacy that is magic. But I remember when I first started, I started with Susie on a Sunday, a 1-hour program. And I thought, and of course you're absolutely right. I could say, yes, I was on tour with, Peter Noon, yeah, and I could tell little stories about Peter and his this, that, and the other. And so I always had the fodder. I had lots of things to talk about. But it wasn't until one day, about a couple of months into it, I suddenly started thinking, I bloody love this microphone. I love it. It's fantastic. And I got this great feeling about it. And from that moment on, it was wonderful. And I'll never forget the day Colin Walters rang me up and said how many thousands were listening, and I'd won this, that, and the other. It was just brilliant, and I won that local radio personality on 2 occasions, the Sony Award. And the first one was for Piccadilly, which was wonderful.
Interestingly, you mentioned about some of the names you'd interviewed over the years, and I think that's a nice thing to pick up on, because we're obviously talking now, this is an interview situation, and you said you've done so many. What is it you kind of relished about talking to people about their lives, their work, their careers? And of the people you interviewed, was there any names that you particularly enjoyed interviewing the most, who were the most sharing about things they'd done in their lives? And were there any that came out to be particularly very disappointing?
Yeah, I found that comedians, comedic actors, particularly Leonard Rossiter's and Ronnie Barker's and people like that, very difficult. They're very difficult. And they are. Lenny Bennett, oh God, really hard. And the people that are on the way up are crap to interview. But the stars and the people that don't have to prove that they are, even if they're on the way up and they don't have to prove it to anybody, they're the ones you want to talk to, and they're the ones that give. I remember interview. Well, I don't think I ever interviewed anybody. I just had a chat. And I remember Jane Fonda and everybody throughout the morning. It was a real special setup, but I had a 1-to-1 with her, and they were all Miss Fonda this, Miss Fonda that. I thought, to hell with that. I said, I'm not going to call you Miss Fonda. Your name's Jane. And, I mean, I felt that's the best way, whether you're interviewing somebody that works down the coal mine or a member of royalty. They are a human being. And I wasn't frightened whether they were, down there or up there. But I remember meeting Jackie Collins. And Jackie Collins, obviously, she'd done the tours. I mean, most people, they're doing a tour with their book, they're sick to bloody death of talking about the bloody book or the film, because they've been interviewed 30,000 bloody times about it.
And probably being asked loads of daft questions in the process.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I remember I said to Jane Fonda, how are you dealing with a divorce? It's fishing doing it for you. You have to sort of try to go somewhere else. And I don't think I asked one question to Jackie Collins about her book, not one. And I recall at the end of that, she was promoting one of her, very titillating books. And she said, you won't like this book anyway. I said, well, I won't be reading it, actually, to be honest with you. So she said, but she said, I know that you would like one of my books. And she said, I'm going to send you that book. And she did. And, things like that. And Charlton Heston wrote me a note from America. And Jack Lemmon asked for a copy of the tape. And I mean, things like that are very, Michael Crawford, he was in Manchester doing Barnum. He introduced me to the opening of Phantom. Tommy Steele did. Things like that. You've got to make a difference. You can't just be the same as everybody else. And I think that's where I had no journalistic background whatsoever. I've even failed the test for bloody Woolworths. So I have no bloody, incredible vocabulary. I just talk. And, and that's, I can't pretend I'm anything other than what I am.
I wanted to ask you, outside of stage, singing and your radio work, you've been involved in lots of charitable and fundraising causes. Can you tell us some of the projects you've worked on and which fundraising efforts you're most proud of?
Well, I started raising money in beginning of 1980, 81, because at the time I was married, I had a home, I had a job, I was successful, and I thought I must do something. I must give something back.
Hmm.
And I wanted to be involved. And the first person I got involved with was, I met him at the Piccadilly Marathon. His name was Neil Cliff, and he was raising money for cancer for a new hospital, Borkart Ward in Wythenshawe. And I found myself at the beginning of that marathon caring about where he was throughout that race. And by the end of it, I waited and put the medal over his neck. And about 4 years later, we were fundraising and building the Neil Cliff Cancer Care Hospital. And then from there, you know, I could get things through the program for so many charities. So charity, I mean, I just got enveloped with it, to be honest with you. In fact, it took over, and it really did take over in the end. But the biggest and most famous is the Kirsty Appeal. And I'd always helped the Francis House Children's Hospital with getting them musicians, sort of a musician or musical instruments and stuff. And then one day, the person that ran it, Sister Aloysius, said, "We've only got 3 months' money. We need 5 million for a safety net." I thought, shit, 5 million, that's not an event. What the hell can I do? And then I saw this little girl running around attached to oxygen, and I knew that she was something very special. And I asked her mother, could she front the campaign I was going to start for this hospice? And she said, well, she's only got 6 weeks to live. And after a gulp and a tear, the next day she came back and said, yes, you can use Kirsty, but never replace her when she goes. Anyway, she didn't go, did she? She started thriving on being involved in that appeal, and we raised that money. David Beckham became our patron. You know, I got whatever she wanted, I got for her. She was the Child of Courage. She was the Pride of Britain. She was the Sports Personality of the Year, first recipient of the Helen Rollinson Award for Courage Against Adversity. I got her everything and raised the 5 million. In fact, 7 million was raised altogether. And she lasted and lived and thrived until she was nearly 21.
I wanted
So
to
that's
ask.
the biggest achievement.
I wanted to ask you a personal question, which relates back to you being so honest and open about your life during your childhood and your early years. And I was going to ask you, if we rewind the clock back, and you've kind of spoken about the difficulties and not having any sort of stability in your life back in those days. Do you think as a result of that your parents didn't particularly provide for you? Do you think that gave you an extra incentive and motive in life to help and provide for others because you never had that safety net yourself?
Oh, I don't know, darling. To be really honest, I don't know. I think that, you know, the Kirsty thing, I wanted to always give, and I went too far. I went too far. I gave up my radio career when I should have kept it going. I sort of, throughout that period of time, you know, husbands came and went, money went, you know, I haven't done things right. You know, there's so many things I've done wrong. I can't say I regret an awful lot, but of course I regret the fact that I didn't have a child. And I think that, you know, Kirsty, for that time, I sort of loaned her, even though she had a mum and dad. I was very much the person that, you know, to the world was seen as the person that looked after her. And I think that gave me so much. But I think that at the end of the 5 million, at that particular point, I'd run out of everything. I'd run out of hope. I'd run out of money. I'd run out of belief. I had sore knees from begging. I'd had it. I literally had it. And so that's when I decided to move back to London and have a rest. Of course, that didn't last long, because, and of course, I still always kept involved with Kirsty right the way through until delivering the epitaph when she died. So
I want to stay on your charity work, and I want to rewind the clock back to 2009 when you became a charity manager for Mohammed Al-Fayed. And I wanted to ask how you met Al-Fayed And what did you learn from him? And what did the work actually involve?
Well, it was wonderful. I mean, as I just said, I'd gone to London 2008, and I was with my best friend, Sue Johnston, who had a house there, and I had the flat at the top. And thought I needed to really, I'd come through breast cancer that last year. Life had gone really into, quite, I don't want to say depressing, because that's not the right word, but I had a lull of everything. I wasn't quite sure where I was going to go next, let's put it that way. And in London, I met up with Mohammed Al-Fayed because he was the very first person that contributed towards the Kirsty appeal. So the very first thing we did was through the through a TV, Sunday People, which was a TV story about Kirsty. And Mr. Al-Fayed, off the back of that, got very involved. He gave me £30,000 after that very first. So he was the very first contributor. And he didn't just do that, because every time we went to London, he gave us a flat in Hyde Park. He would entertain Kirsty in the Georgian restaurant at Harrods. He would allow her to choose whatever she wanted around the whole, I was going to say shop. He was just amazing. So when I went back to London, and Kirsty still was coming down to London to do little things that we got arranged, even though I wasn't really involved that much, but I was still obviously helping. And he said he was looking for a charity, somebody to represent him when he couldn't go to places, and someone to let him know whether people really genuinely needed help or not. And so I was to become his fundraising advisor. And it was magnificent. And Mohammed Al-Fayed is a much maligned human being, because when people think of Mohammed Al-Fayed, they think of the guy that just spouts his mouth off, about in the royal family, and obviously of the tragedy of Dodi, etc. But he is the most generous human being I have ever known in my life. He is kindness beyond belief. And he sent me to places that I never would have experienced. Mongolia. He sent me to Mongolia to look at how the children were looked after in the orphanages. To Egypt, to see the children that are on the streets. And he was absolutely fantastic. And it wasn't an easy thing, because I did have to go back and prove, on every occasion, how much was needed and why it was needed, and how honest and genuine the situations were. But it was a fantastic privilege. And the other thing is that I wanted to build up the fact of the Camilla Al-Fayed name, because she's the most amazing woman in the world, his daughter. So I built Camilla Nurses, Great Ormond Street and other places, and came up with ideas to really sort of get things on the way for her. And I used to organise, and together with one of the other lovely ladies there, to organise a huge music festival at the school. And it, I just got so involved with totally different things. It was a whole different world of my life. It was a real privilege.
Earlier on in our discussion, you mentioned that back in the 60s, you say you weren't business savvy at all. And you mentioned that you were kind of ripped off and so on. And many musicians were back then. Obviously, working for someone who's very successful, an entrepreneur, powerful, of status, of stature, do you think you learn more about business life, or having to be hard in business and make quick fixed decisions?
No, I'm crap at it. Absolutely crap. No, I mean, the thing is, he didn't want an accountant, did he? He's full of accountants and all that bollocks. What he wanted was somebody that genuinely thought people needed things. And I couldn't write him a whole sort of portfolio on the finances of this and that crap. Sure. But I could certainly tell him that, this particular child has had 7 bloody operations, and she, and and I would tell him, the truth. He knew I wasn't going to bullshit him. So that, it's just being someone that trying to be honest, really, and loyal. And I was, and I will always be loyal to him.
Susie, we come on shortly to our last set of questions that
Oh
we
God,
ask.
here we go. Right.
We ask all your take guests these 13 quickfire questions.
Okay.
But my last one, to ease into that moment.
Oh, go on, ease away.
Ease away, yeah. You've worked across a number of areas during your career.
Yeah.
We discussed stage, we discussed music, radio broadcasting, television, presenting, and your charity work.
Yeah.
Which area have you found the most fulfilling and why?
Bloody hell. That's a real tough one, darling, because, you know, there's several things that I've been really felt, well, if something's worth doing, I think that what motivates people in life is passion. You know, if somebody says to me, you know, would you do this? Would you help this charity? Would you do that? It's no point unless I feel passionate about it. There's just no point. There's no point in doing it. And it's a problem, that, for me, because I can't just take any job. I can't just do anything. I have to feel that I'm wanted and needed, because that's been one of the biggest problems of my life. Because when you have rejection in your childhood, sadly, every other poor bugger has to put up with the fact you might feel you're rejected along the way. So, you know, I think I'm more needy, really, than I should have been in my life. That's one of the things I would like to have changed. But I think I'm most proud of being able to help Francis House Children's Hospice, to give them a safety net. But I'm also proud of my Sony Awards.
Susie Mathis, is that moment we ask all your take guests these same questions. You don't have to think about them in any length or any detail. They just, we want to kind of find out things you like outside of your career, maybe things you're not so keen on. So here we go. Number one, what would you say, Susie, is your favorite pastime?
I think my dog.
What kind of dog?
She is a dachshund, a wide-haired Yaxie with one ear. She is 6 years old, and I mean, I love walking my dog. I love being with her. It's just she and I throughout the whole of the COVID situation, and I don't know how to got through it without her. So I think my favorite pastime is definitely my lovely little dog. Her name is Gertie, named after the little girl in E.T. I always loved that name. I would have called a child that.
Nice moment to move on to the next question. You reference a film, E.T., the extraterrestrial.
Yeah.
But now I'm going to ask you, what is your favorite film and why?
I forgot to only give you one for these things.
You can say a couple, because I find I couldn't choose one.
Right.
I'd have about 20.
Funny Girl and West Side Story. They are my films. Funny Girl, I think I've seen both of them at least 8, 9 times. Funny Girl changed my life. I thought Barbara Streisand in that was just absolutely, I thought, if I could ever be anybody in my life, if I could have ever interviewed anybody in my life, if I ever could have met somebody in my life, it would have been and would be Barbara Streisand.
And West Side Story, is that the original or the remake?
Well, the thing is, I actually did enjoy the remake too, to be really honest, I did. But the first one, I remember watching that in London in a theatre, a cinema, and I remember I was still sat there about an hour afterwards. I was just completely and utterly blown away. The dancing was just superb. From the cinema
and to musicals, we now move on to novelists, and I wanted to ask, who is your favorite novelist?
Well, the only way I can really choose that is because of the book, and that my favorite book is Birdsong, Sebastian Faulks. That book will always be. I can't ever imagine reading anything that would affect me as much as Birdsong.
You've done so many different things in your life, and we've spoken about them within this last hour.
Yeah.
If you could have had a different profession, what would it have been?
I just honestly, I've had 5 different careers, haven't I? So it's a bit difficult to find yet another one. Honestly, I don't think there's another one, but I suppose if I'd have trained for anything, maybe a lawyer.
Who in life would you say has been your greatest inspiration?
Yeah, well, it's Sister Aloysius from Francis House Children's Hospice. Definitely.
We talk newspapers and the press now.
Mm-hmm.
do you read a newspaper? And
Yeah.
if so, which one?
Well, I read the Daily Mail. I hate lots of it, but I do the crossword on the back page every night of my life.
We talk food now. Are you a cook? And if so, what is your favorite food?
I'm crap, and I love lobster thermidor.
You can't be as bad as me. I'm absolutely shocking.
I can't be bothered. There's
Do you know
more to
what?
life.
I love all creative things. I love radio. I love cinema. I love music, but I hate
Yeah, me
cooking.
too. Yeah, forget it. Don't matter how many cookery programs I watch. I think on your bike, you go and do it. Not for me.
Any chefs watching will be sending a lynch mob, I think, to come and get me. This next one stumps all guests.
Go on.
They always struggle with this one. Who would you say is your favorite cultural icon? It could be a political figure from history, maybe a revolutionary, maybe someone who was an inventor who changed the world in a significant way.
Yeah, it's a real tough one, this one, isn't it? I think I'm going to go for George Michael.
Yeah? Why George Michael?
I think he was the finest singer we've ever had. I think he was. I love George Michael. It's a toss up because I can change again. You see, I can go back to Barbra Streisand, but a cultural fit. Or Margot Fonteyn, my favorite ballet dancer. Those were. I mean, she changed my life when I was young. And then George and Barbara have changed it, and I've looked up to them I've still got hanging my VIP thing to see George Michael at his final concerts. So I'd never go for a politician.
Did you meet George Michael?
Yes.
And
came to my 64th birthday.
Oh wow! And what was he like as a person?
Fabulous.
Yeah.
He was more excited about Alison Steadman being there than anybody was excited about seeing him. He was amazing. No, fabulous. Yeah, great guy.
Tragically, no longer here. Died very
young. I mean, that Christmas, myself and Sue, when I lived with her, he came to London to my party. We had a party because it was the same day as the wedding for Kate and Will. And we had the Not the Royal wedding party at Susie's birthday. And it was such a special day, and he was just wonderful. And after that, we went to see Symphonia, and he was just a great guy. It was a terrible shock.
Next one, what would you say is your favorite curse word and why?
Well, it's fuck. And the reason being, it's just so much better saying fuck off than go away.
It is. What would you say is your favorite holiday place or
Can I go back to that fuck one and just explain something?
Yeah, of course.
My grandfather used to say the swear word in between the word. So he'd say Tom fucking Marto. And when I went to the stage school all those years ago, I was like a little gypsy that swore. I wasn't like any of those posh kids at all. So the swearing, I'm afraid, stayed with me my whole life. I don't know how on earth I ever edited all those years on radio.
What would you say next is your favorite place or holiday destination?
Yeah, well, I've took Dea in Mallorca. I absolutely love. The first time I saw Dea from a distance with the 13th century church, I just cried. I thought it was the most beautiful place. And Mykonos, and I love Mykonos. I love the light in Mykonos.
We talk music now. This is going to be difficult.
Oh, hell, now what?
Who is your favorite music artist, and what is your favorite album? Is there an album you go back to on a regular basis?
I don't really listen to albums. Alexa is my music outlet, and thank God for Alexa, because it's wonderful to have that.
I confess to do the same. Yeah,
it's just fantastic. I mean, you're sitting talking, you say, do you remember that song? Play Alexa, and you can hear. I mean, what could you do? You couldn't go and get the album out, get the thing, So albums, the last album that I did have a great love for was the Eagles, but years ago with Hotel California and all that. But nowadays, I just can't think of an album. I haven't bought an album for, God knows, donkey's years. The first record I ever bought was You Really Got Me, Kinks.
The great Ray Davis.
Great
Yeah.
Ray Davis, absolutely love that record. That's the first one in my entire memory. But there's no album nowadays I'd even consider. It's all, now 300,002, isn't it?
and climbing, and more and more and more. I have to be careful mentioning her name as well, who we just said, because if I do, I might have a legal dispute because the song might come on. I might hit a copyright breach or something like that.
Careful. I've just realised, the last CDs that I ever bought were Josh Groban.
Oh, right. Okay. Ah.
Isn't that weird? But I haven't bought one of those for like 15, 20 years. So, well, it seems like that.
We move on to the last two questions. The
Okay.
first one, Susie Mathis, what is your greatest achievement to date?
Still being here at 75, I think, is my greatest achievement after so many different things have happened in this world and I've lost so many friends. I suppose the achievement seriously would have to be the Kirsty appeal.
And finally, Susie Mathis, how do you wish to be remembered?
I'd like to be remembered as a loyal friend.
Thank you kindly for joining me for the last hour. I found I've really enjoyed the interview because you've been very real, frank and honest throughout the interview. There's been moments where it's been very funny and there's been moments where it's been very touching as well. But I'd like to thank you for being so honest about everything that's happened in your life, from tragedy at the beginning, successful moments, and tragedy in other parts during your life. And I'd like to thank you for taking part. I hope you've enjoyed it.
I have, darling. Thank you so much for inviting me. I didn't know what the hell it was when you sent me an email, but I thought, well, what am I going to do that morning? I'll do that for it. That's no problem.
Thank you kindly. And finally, how do we find out more about you? And can we listen to you on a current radio station?
No, you can't. I did during lockdown. I did volunteer, and I did. Oh, is the time in that, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I did do things, but I'm sorry about that.
No, it's all right. Not a problem at all.
But no, at the moment, I do sort of a few events, a few things. I'm not sure. I have. Oh God, it's driving me mad that now.
With the agent's phone in, I think it might be.
Yeah, if I could have somebody ring, who could it be? That would be nice, wouldn't it? If it was, yeah. Let's just leave. I always say, universe, I'm not finished yet. I still would like to do things. I would love to still be involved in radio, but not on a voluntary basis anymore. But I would still love to do it. That's the only thing really that I'd like to do again.
Finally, I wish you all the very best in the future, rest of this year. And again, thanks for being so real, honest, and taking part in Your Take.
It's a great pleasure.